Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Shakespearean Shrew. I am your Shakespearean Shrew, Karen Feiner, professor from the University of Oklahoma and lover of all things Bard. This podcast is a decorum be damned entrance into understanding Shakespeare's stages, for there are many, and all the players on it. We are at the Mermaid Tavern at OSP, and we are talking with theatrical and visual artist Alissa Branch. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're really excited because you have been a topic of conversation for many of the actors that we've interviewed as they have come through your classes at OU and rave about you. So we're really excited that you're here.
Thank you.
And two, you have a show in the very near future. So you're presenting As You Like It at OU.
I am, yes. And I feel very lucky. We are actually on our biggest stage, which is the bracket stage at OU. And it means that we have room to do things like build a forest, which has been really exciting.
That is really exciting. I am intrigued already. So, As You Like It, it's interesting because this summer I was doing research for a project, and so I got some funding to go around the country and go to Shakespeare theaters. And I went to Shakespeare of New Jersey, and then I went to Independent Shakespeare in LA.
Awesome.
And they both did As You Like It.
Oh, that's really funny. Yeah, that's funny timing.
And then when I came back here and I was looking at the productions, I was like, third time's the charm.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I often think that that 12th Night, which is a little bit of a sister play, right, to As You Like It, I often think that it's done more than As You Like It, actually. So it's interesting to me that you happen across so many other productions in one season.
I feel like there's almost seasons.
Yeah.
Because it also happened this season with Macbeth, where Macbeth was popping up across the country. Since I was dealing with comedies, I was targeting the comedies instead of the tragedies. But do you think that's because of the climate and some of the things that are happening in a community? Is that why certain plays tend to pop up more at certain times?
It's always a little bit of a mystery to me, but I do think there are certain themes in As You Like It that might feel relevant today. Certainly, as I'm listening to the text over and over again in rehearsal, there are things that occur to me regularly. Like regime changes, for example, the politics of a court, right, are a thing that is prominently featured in As You Like It. And the idea of a woman particularly wanting to break free and go out into a space where she can make all of her own choices. These things certainly resonate for me about the play. So I can speak to why I'm interested in it. It's hard for me to say to what degree other people are actually thinking about these same issues.
So how did it get chosen? How, in a theater atmosphere, do they choose the productions for a season?
It's a little bit different in an academic institution than it is for Oklahoma Shakespeare, right? Because we're taking into account a variety of programming for the audiences, but also a variety of training opportunities for the students. So we're always trying to balance what different kinds of genres might the audience be interested in, and what different kinds of genres do the students really need to rotate through in their 4 years with us. And we try to do a Shakespeare or something with very heightened text at least every other year. And I would say that we haven't done as much comedy in general in the last few years. And so we know they need heightened text preparation, partly because whether they intend to do Shakespeare for the rest of their life or not, the students quickly find that he's still the most produced playwright in the Western world. And so it's useful to know how to perform him, not just because I would argue it helps you with all the other language you'll encounter in all different kinds of plays, but also because he's a really good paycheck. Yeah. So, right, we're always trying to train them for the things they want to do and the really good paychecks at the same time. And for some of the students, that certainly overlaps, and they want to do Shakespeare, and they also know that they're really hireable for that. So I think As You Like It came about because we know we want them to have experience with heightened text, and we hadn't done a lot of comedy lately. And so it seemed like it was a great idea to mix the two, and also to learn about how comedy works, specifically when you're dealing with heightened text.
Yeah. So do you have certain students that you had in mind as you were thinking about comedy? Where were those, were there those students that are just really good at playing the clown, playing that role?
I mean, sort of. There were students that I certainly was excited to see audition because I knew that they were actors who understood where the funny is, right, in a text. And also, I was looking specifically for actors who can make bold choices with their entire physical instrument when they're acting, which I think Shakespeare demands, right? Because the size of the stakes and the language are so high, and the want is always so high for Shakespeare's characters. I think it requires that you engage your entire physical instrument. So there were actors certainly that I had in mind that I thought could do that. And then there were other actors that I was excited to see how they would rise to the occasion. And I find that when I'm casting, certainly at the academic level, but really professionally as well, I can have all the preconceived ideas about who I think the perfect cast would be. But they always come in and surprise me. Someone comes in really hungry and has done a lot of homework and is really ready to rise to the occasion. And someone else that maybe was in my brain doesn't seem as well prepared or as interested, or gets pulled in another direction toward another show. So I think one of the things I love about casting is being surprised.
So with those surprises, does that help you shape the production?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there were several roles in As You Like It that I didn't think gender presentation of the actor mattered at all. And that depending which actors really rose to those other things I was just talking about, we would tilt the character or the production one direction or another to acknowledge, the gender expression that the audience would be seeing on the stage. This is, of course, always a really fun topic because even before you get to the question of Rosalind dressing up as a boy, right, we of course know that in Shakespeare's day, he would be having boy actors playing Rosalind and then Rosalind dressing up as a boy. And so because gender has always been a fascinating, really complicated topic in Shakespeare, I continue to think, why not open up all of the plays? Why not make all of the plays available to any actor and then see what it does to the play? So I've had a pretty good time experimenting with that, not only with As You Like It, but with lots of Shakespeare.
Well, and I think it's really interesting that you talk about that, because it is so funny how, one, that was so prevalent back then because
right,
women weren't allowed on the stage.
Right.
And so Shakespeare is really one of the first playwrights to write, one of them, friends, not the only one, right, but one of the best for women characters. Because before that, either they just didn't put a lot of women on the stage, or the women characters were sad.
And side pieces to the male characters who were obviously driving the story.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I loved reading your note that you wrote about As You Like It, because I think it is so interesting that in this production, Shakespeare gives the last words to a woman.
Yeah, Rosalind gets the epilogue. Spoiler alert, if you don't know that As You Like It, Rosalind gets the epilogue, which means she literally and figuratively, right, gets the last word. And not only that, but she's given more words than any other female character in Shakespeare. And she has lines about that very fact, right? She says things like, "Do you not know that I am woman when I think I must speak?" And I'm interested in the topic of women being allowed to speak their mind, partly, as you mentioned, because of things going on in America today, where it seems like people are trying to silence women and women's voices. And so I love a play where a woman gets to go out in the forest, take off her heavy petticoats, take off her corset, right? Kind of free her body, and then decide how she wants to proceed.
And it's interesting because in this one, we have only one woman who is dressed as a man, who is a man dressed as a woman dressed as a man.
Right.
But anyway, right, and then we have Celia,
right?
Words are hard today. Who is her cousin. And she also gets to kind of throw off her position, her role that she has to play, and take on Eliana and play a role she wants to play.
Yes.
And I think hers is also interesting because it's one of the tightest bonds we see. Usually we've got the bromance going on.
Right.
Shakespeare's really good at the bromance.
Right.
But this one, the relationship between these two cousins seems to almost override any other relationship in the play to me.
Yeah, and there is language around that relationship and As You Like It that, as we've been working on the play, really reminds me of things that are said about Helena and Hermia in Midsummer Night's Dream, right? That they say basically to each other, "We have been together since we were in the cradle. We have been together forever. We were each other's first friends. We were each other's person." So in both plays, they're navigating these friendships as they're starting to have relationships with men, right? And seeing how those bonds are flexible or breakable, or
Yes.
how they rebound, right? When other lovers come into the picture. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't go as great in a Midsummer Night's Dream as it does.
Yeah, it's a touch more complicated over there.
So, how do you deal with the plot of As You Like It, where you've got these amazing characters? Some of my favorite characters are in As You Like It, but the plot, it's almost like Shakespeare was, going through and was like, I really like these characters. I'm just going to throw all of them into the forest and see what happens.
Yeah, it is interesting structurally, right? We start at the court, which in our production is a pretty severe, regimented place. And then eventually, when Rosalind and Celia are banished, we get to move the play out into the forest. And in our version, that is quite a shift on stage as well as out in the audience, actually. But then there are these flashback moments where we flash back to court, and we flash back to the Duke and the Lords talking about what to do, right? About the fact that these women have run off and are doing their own thing, and about other problems in the play. That's interesting in a variety of ways in terms of staging. First of all, right? Okay, we've built this forest, and now we're out in the forest, but also for like 1 minute at a time, we have to flash back to the court. How do we logistically do that? I don't know if Shakespeare put that there maybe to remind us that the court is still out there, and that eventually in a comedy, what usually happens, right, is that the people who have gone and shed all of their societal expectations eventually come around to a place where they go, okay, now I'm ready to go back to the court and get married and do the more traditional things, but maybe on my own terms. And As You Like It is it fits into that category pretty perfectly. But you're right that when we're out in the forest, there are a lot of characters that appear and disappear seemingly at random. And I certainly did do a thoughtful snipping of the script to try to help streamline some of the side stories that feel to me a little bit unwieldy at times.
Yeah, this one has some unwieldy moments, so I'm excited to see who you brought in and who you kicked to the curb.
Yeah, one of the things Shakespeare does sometimes that I always try to tinker with a little bit is they bring in characters at the end of the play that we've never met, maybe heard about, maybe not even heard about, and then gives them part of the denouement, part of the sort of wrapping up of the story. And I sometimes think it's possible to let one of the earlier characters weave back in a way that makes them more familiar to the audience from the beginning of the play. And in terms of staging a giant Shakespeare play that requires a lot of actors, it also allows for using fewer actors without the need of doubling that could confuse the audience. So we've taken a few liberties. We've taken a few small liberties, and we've created a little bit of whimsical redirection, I would say, of some of those characters in the second half of the play.
One of them that comes to mind is, of course, Hymen.
Yes,
who
we've kept Hymen.
Nice. Well, Hymen is just shows up at the end. But again, talking about females and women, especially at that time in terms of marriage, it's interesting because you can't really kick Hymen out of the club on that one.
Right. Well, and it's interesting to think about who is Hymen, right? I mean, even the word in a modern context, right? We hear that word and go, okay, well, that's about female sexuality. Right. And so there's something already sort of fertile, right? About this character who appears and seems to be a forest god, forest sprite. It's not totally clear. We are going with a female goddess of the forest, which ties into my feeling that it's really Rosalind's play, and that this is a play about women going off and finding their own agency and making their own decisions. So we have doubled her with another character, but I'll wait and let that be a surprise.
Okay, I'm excited to see. So with such a big stage, because we got, my class last semester, we got to see Proof.
Oh, great.
And it was fantastic. They loved it. I loved it.
Oh, yeah. I love that play. That play is really beautifully written.
And so that was obviously a very small, intimate setting.
Yeah.
And now, like you said, you're in a very big stage and a very big space.
Yeah.
How do you keep that intimacy? How do you keep that engagement between the actors and the audience?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite challenges, actually. I love theater in your lap, like Proof was, right? Where the audience feels like they are almost on the stage with us and really beholden to the story because they're sort of living through it in the space with us. I walked into the big bracket stage and looked around at it, and it has this giant proscenium arch, right? And traditionally, plays that are performed in a space like that stay either behind the proscenium arch or maybe bring the action out onto the apron a little bit. We're doing a lot more than that. We are physically engaging. We're not going to stay safely behind the proscenium and have the audience sit safely out there in the dark, observing as though they're looking into a doll's house. We, in fact, are going to have actors entering through the audience, exiting through the audience, maybe sitting down beside audience members, playfully engaging them as though, in my imagination, there is the court on stage and the forest actually extends all the way out. So I'm a giant believer that when it's a Shakespeare play, if you let the audience sit out there in the dark and not be responsible to the story in any way, because the language is so heightened and requires so much of the audience, you could lose them pretty easily. So anytime anyone will let me play in a flexible way in a space, that is actually my favorite thing to do with Shakespeare.
That is one of my favorite things to do as an audience.
Excellent. Then you won't hate our play.
I will love it. So I brought my students here to OSP to see Twelfth Night.
Great.
And one of my favorite moments was one of the actors sat in one of my students' laps. And my student's face was hilarious.
I bet.
And in class the next day, she was, Dr. Feiner, I didn't realize they were going to sit in my lap.
Yeah, I will say we're not going to physically touch people without, at least making sure that they have invited us to, because I do think that's a fine line. I love nothing more than wrapping the audience in the story, literally. But it actually was said to me in a production meeting at OU. The question came up, do we need to let the audience know maybe that it's going to be really interactive so that we don't also distance them in fear, right?
Yeah.
Because they fear actually being touched and things. But on the other hand, if you know that it's possible that the characters are going to turn to you and really engage you in the story, I think it is exciting for most people.
Yes, I think probably 95%. There might be a 5% of people who are not
not so into it.
But I also feel like body language, the way that actors can read situations, that's part of what makes them
absolutely
so great. And so their ability to read the audience and, I've had very few instances where that's happened to a student that was like, absolutely not.
Right.
No, completely closed off.
Good. You're reassuring me then that this will probably work out pretty well. We have been talking in rehearsal a little bit about reading the room, right? And also they will know a lot of people in the audience. Most nights there'll be students that we recognize, School of Drama folks will be around. And so we're talking about choosing thoughtfully who we engage with, at least at the beginning of the play until people get the hang of the device we're using.
They know that you're doing it, and then
right.
They're going to play.
Right. Exactly.
But yes. Well, I'll tell my students, but I think they'll be more excited than anything else.
Good.
So with this play, I love the aspect of fools in this play. Mm-hmm. For me, I love fools. If I could talk about fools all the time, I would. Because for me, I think they are so important to Shakespeare's works. They show us what otherwise we wouldn't see because they are on the boundaries of society, both in the courts, but also on the stage.
Yeah, and it's interesting that in As You Like It, we have a court fool, right, Touchstone, and we have a forest fool, Jaques. And so it's very interesting to compare and contrast the two and to figure out what different functions they serve.
I absolutely agree. I've had people often not even consider Jaques a fool, which I struggle to wrap my head around because he is that character. He is, that character that we can laugh at even as he's giving us insight that we wouldn't see otherwise.
I think it depends on the definition of fool. Like sometimes when people think about a Shakespearean fool, they think clown, right? Only a clown. I think the definition of a Shakespearean fool is much broader and deeper than that. So they do, for instance, Touchstone in our production does some physical clowning and uses their body in ways that maybe other characters who are more at the center of society don't. But also, I always think the fools are not only probably the smartest people in the room because they're the observers from the fringes, but I also think they tend to be the characters who say the quiet part out loud.
Yes.
Right. And voice things that the other characters either aren't equipped to do or it wouldn't be proper for other characters to voice.
Well, and the term fool comes from originally phallus, which meant basically the bag of, like a bag of air, like a wind bag.
Yeah.
Which is what they put on their scepter. An animal bladder is what the jester would have on their scepter.
I've missed a real prop opportunity here.
And then it turned to phallus, which was arrogant.
Right.
Which really corresponds well to our understanding of the fool exceeding their boundaries, exceeding their place, which is what their job was.
Yeah, it's actually also not, you're making me realize it's a thing they talk about in As You Like It. They, especially Jaques, talks about wanting to be given all of the privileges that a fool at court might have.
Yes.
So I think that's a really interesting angle, actually, that they not only say things that are outside the bounds of most of the rest of the characters, but they know it and they might acknowledge it. I also find that Jaques and a couple of other characters in As You Like It acknowledge, hey, we are in a big round O, a big theater space, right? So sometimes they're also a little meta, I think, in terms of the wink in the language.
I think what you said about clowns and fools is so interesting because, so if you look at the OED, the first definition of a fool is an idiot, somebody who doesn't have a lot of knowledge.
Right.
The last definition of a fool is somebody who is insightful, who can tell us about society, who can insult and question society. And you're sitting there going, these seem like very contradictory elements. And I think that's the difference. I think the clown does the right thing, but it's usually a mistake, like in, Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah, right, absolutely.
And then we've got the fool who can see what others cannot.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I also think one of the ways the fool gets away with saying things that they're not supposed to say is through clownish behavior. So sometimes they use clowning as a tactic, right? Oh, I'm just a clown, so I don't know what I'm saying or I don't know what I'm doing, right? Pay no mind to me. And so I think they're able to travel a little differently through society because they use clowning tactics, might be the way
I agree. I love that.
Yeah.
I think that, yes, they can play the madman as a way to be like, can't be held accountable.
Right. I'm just a clown over here. Yeah.
So you talked about the forest, and you talked about the forest coming in to the audience, which I really love, because the outsiders are the people in the forest. The outsiders in As You Like It are many.
Yeah, they are. They are legion.
They are. So what does As You Like It to you really say about the role of outsiders? Because it's really different from a lot of Shakespeare's other plays in how he sets that up. Like you said, there's a couple of flashbacks.
Yeah.
But the majority of the time, and even at the end, while we do restore order in terms of marriage,
right,
we don't see them going back to the city. They stay in the forest, at least
for a little while,
within the confines of the play.
Yeah.
So to you, as you've been directing this play, have you had any thoughts about outsiders and how that fits in?
Absolutely. At first, it seemed to me as though the forest was full of Robin Hoods, and people who were out there that were mavericks, that were making up their own rules. But actually, the more I've explored the play, it's interesting balance that there is a new duke at court, and then the old duke, his brother, is still sort of reigning, but out in the forest. So in a way, it becomes two tribes in my imagination. There's the tribe at court who are stuck in some ways, and have to obey all the rules, and are told what to do and how to do it. And then there's this merry band of players out in the forest that's clearly having a lot more fun. And as people migrate over the course of the play from the court to the forest, they find their own voice and their own happiness in a different way. Even Oliver, who's an ardent supporter of the court and the rules and doesn't want to give Orlando anything he wants right at the beginning of the play, halfway through the play, he comes out to the forest and falls in love. And so I've stopped thinking of the forest as an outside place, actually. I've almost started thinking of the forest as the inside place.
This
right?
is where everybody wants to be.
Yeah, that if you can escape the court and come play with us, life will be fuller, richer, better, more of the senses, more free. And so I guess I actually have stopped looking at it that way as we've been rehearsing it.
So as you've had these ideas, these thoughts, how have your scene designers and your costume designers helped realize some of these ideas?
We have an amazing set of designers on As You Like It. We have student designers for everything except costumes. Costumes are designed by faculty member Lloyd Cracknell, who is our costume design professor, and also also designs for Oklahoma Shakespeare and for other regional theaters. So he works a lot. And I would say, I don't know if he would say, but I would say that his specialty is Elizabethan costumes and Elizabethan clothing and Renaissance, the Renaissance period in general. So I'm very lucky to have him on board. But also the student designers who have been working alongside him, Abby Pirtle, who is our scenic design student, and Ruby Rabston, who's doing lighting design, and Connor Lynn, who's doing sound design, have all risen to this occasion so beautifully that it feels like I'm working with all professional designers, with just young professionals. The way they're talking to each other and collaborating with each other, especially I would say scenic and lighting design so far, the way they're in collaboration with each other about the way light will work and the way surfaces will work and shapes will work on stage has been really inspiring. So they're terrific. And because we're in such a big space, part of our challenge has been, how do we let the size of the spectacle rise to meet the size of the space so that it doesn't feel visually empty, or empty in terms of sound, except for the actor voices. So we've built a bit of a court, we've built a bit of a forest, and I think it's going to be really magical and beautiful. I'm very excited about it.
Oh man. So what you just talked about with your students and how they've risen to the occasion, it's like working with professionals.
Yeah.
I've gotten to interview quite a few of your previous students, like I mentioned earlier. Shout out to Belle, shout out to Justin.
I love them. Yeah, great.
And so they mentioned a lot about what you taught them. And so for students who want to make this their life, who want to follow this passion, what is it that you focus on teaching? Because I also know that you have a master class, Shakespeare from the page to the stage.
I do.
And so I'm really curious, because they've done great things. They've already directed their first show here at OSP. They've really taken on that idea of a professionalism and expanding their identities in this realm.
I'm really proud of the work they've been doing, and I know they've been having a wonderful time working at Oklahoma Shakespeare. So that's been a gift to everyone, I think.
Agreed. We love them.
Do you mean in terms of Shakespeare particularly?
So in terms of Shakespeare,
or being an actor in general, storyteller?
So I'm good with both. So what do you think?
I think I try to teach from a place of curiosity and joy. I essentially say to my actors from very early in the process that I already know they're a storyteller, and we just have to figure out what material excites them, how they can grow into their physical instrument, because I get most of the college students when they're 18 years old and they leave me about the time they're 22. And that is such a huge time of growth, emotionally, intellectually, physically, into their physical actor bodies, right? And so I take pretty seriously the job of nurturing them through those transitions. And I know that the 18-year-old that we get is not the 22-year-old we're going to graduate. And so my philosophy about it is that at the beginning, they need a lot of coaching and mentoring and encouragement for most of them. A lot of them were the stars in high school, but they get to an intensely we recruit all over the country to have
Right.
these 20 actors a year, and it can feel somewhat intimidating, I think, to come in and realize, oh, everybody's really good, right? And suddenly they feel as though they have to work harder to find their place. And I really enjoy coaching them through that process and encouraging them that if they weren't already a storyteller, they wouldn't have found their way into the room, right? I tend to believe we're all natural storytellers. All humans have been telling stories. That's the way we've preserved our history since we were doing it around the fires before recorded history, right? So I tend to think that the baseline is we're all storytellers, but in some of us, the need to get up and walk our bodies and our voices and our imaginations through fictional stories is just heightened. Whether you're an actor or a songwriter or a director or a scenic designer or a novelist or a painter, right? It's all storytelling. And so if they found their way into my rehearsal room or into my classroom, my job is to nurture that desire to tell a story and try to figure out how to help them find their own unique voice. That being said, I think when it's Shakespeare, there are a lot of tips and clues, right, that Shakespeare writes into the language. And one of my very favorite things to do in life is help actors realize how much of the story is already on the page, and how we can learn to find all of these clues that will unlock the text so that it doesn't feel separate or scary or other than us just because it's written in iambic pentameter and it was written 400 years ago, and that actually we carry around already in our bodies the rhythm of the iambic pentameter. It's the same as the heartbeat, right? And so I try to find ways to make it feel organic and close to them, and something that innately they already know. They just don't have language yet to put to it.
Is there one practice or one thing you do with your students where you're like, in terms of getting them to engage with the words, engage with their story, their voice? Is there one thing that you could tell us about or even show us that you do to kind of get them?
Yeah, this would be a great question to ask them, actually, because I would be so interested to know when they look back on it, after the fact, what do they take from it?
I will ask them.
Great. I'd be curious. You're making me want to ask them. But I start really with the words and the language and the rhythm of that language. And on day one, we start clapping out iambic pentameter, which is sort of funny because actually a lot of As You Like It is written in prose. We can talk about that too. But because so much of Shakespeare is in verse, right? And that's the thing that feels foreign to them. I really start with the idea that the iambic pentameter it's in us. It's ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. And before we get to any Shakespeare, we start thinking about sentences in the English language that already kind of fall out in that iambic, roughly 10-syllable way. Like, I did not want to go to work today is actually iambic pentameter, just nobody knows they're already speaking it, right? Get out and don't come back without a job. It's iambic pentameter, right? But they don't know that they're doing it. I'm hungry and I want to eat some lunch, right? Like we do it all the time. And so I try to demystify it in the beginning and say, you're already doing it. It's our footfalls. It's heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe, right? We're walking iambic pentameter. We're breathing iambic pentameter. It's in our heartbeat. And so if you can make it not feel scary and separate, but like these things we're already doing that now we can be paying attention to and looking for, I find they have a totally different approach to it. And then I start with things like, my favorite thing to start with is the prologue from Romeo and Juliet, because it happens to be in sonnet form. So you can talk about sonnet form, and it packs so much information into those lines, right? Into 140 syllables, I guess it is, right? And you learn so much about the play in such a short period of time. And so I like to talk about Shakespeare's language as being really dense, like a crushed car, right? That if you crush a car and put it in one of those compactors, you still have all the car, you have all the metal, but it takes up less space and it's incredibly heavy. And I like to think about how if you were to be able to start pulling those pieces of metal apart, you would be able to put the car all back together. But Shakespeare condenses it all and puts it in the verse form. And I could talk about this all day. But
I love that.
Once you can kind of get them excited about the idea that it's all right there on the page and it already lives in your body, then it's a process of teaching your body, your voice, and your imagination to rise to the size of that language and those beautiful stakes and needs that make the characters have to speak in iambic pentameter because it's so big.
Well, and I think what you're talking about is so important, and it's something that we tend to forget, because when you're talking about As You Like It, and it's a pastoral, which basically means at that time they were celebrating, being out in the wilderness and all of that. And Shakespeare, who had lived the wilderness and came to the city,
Yeah, right.
I don't think he missed it. I don't think he missed the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
And so he brings in this idea of the pastoral basically to mock it for the most part. And I think part of that is the language choices that he makes that are discordant with the pastoral.
Do you mean because he has people speaking verse or in very heightened text out in the brambles, out in the woods? Yeah, that is a really interesting thing. I always feel like wherever they are, Shakespeare's characters are just fighting for such giant things that they need more soaring language than we ever get, right? That they are fighting for love, sex, death, and the crown. Like it's never, what are we going to have for breakfast today, right? Like some modern playwrights, are talking about smaller domestic things. Shakespeare has elements of that, but really the play is about all the big core needs that we have as human beings. And so I think it can't help but bleed out into the forest because they're still out there going, but Phoebe, right? Love me. And at a certain point, I was thinking a great musical, the character has to burst into song because the size of their need is so big they can't just talk anymore. And I tend to think that when we've been speaking prose for a while in Shakespeare, if the size of the character's need gets big enough, look out. They won't sing, don't worry. But they will break into iambic pentameter because the soaring verse of the poetry suits the language it's the language they need.
Oh, I love that. I love that because then I talked to Chris Cuss and we were talking about, fight choreography. And for him, you broke out into fighting because you ran out of words.
Yeah, great.
And so
you go from prose to verse to fight. Yeah, maybe so. That makes a lot of sense to me, actually. I'll have to talk to Chris about that too.
Yeah, I was like, that's a nice little building block we've got there.
Yeah.
That's fun. So there is something I wanted to talk about because you're in kind of a different realm at OU than you would be at, say, Oklahoma Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Funding.
Oh.
So, and again, that's different. I'm not sure how different though. So I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that aspect.
Oh, I think the arts in America, whether it's in academia or in the professional theater, always need more funding. And certainly we do fund drives at OU and try to source donors from a wide variety of places, just like we do at Oklahoma Shakespeare. I'm actually finding it really interesting to be a professor at OU and serve as an associate artistic director here at Oklahoma Shakespeare because I'm sort of getting to witness the challenges of both. And I find that they overlap quite a bit and they can help each other out, right? We can have students come work at Oklahoma Shakespeare to try to also help not only the students, but also the theater, right? And in terms of funding, I would still say the College of Fine Arts at OU does a great job of fundraising. But if you look around at the university, I would say in terms of funding, we're valued differently than maths and sciences still, right?
Yes.
And I think when you're talking about places where funding might be cut, the arts are always in lean times, right? Or in times of uncertainty, the arts always take a hit first. So I'm a great believer that if we want all of this to continue, because our government doesn't necessarily fund it for us, right? Like in some other countries, we have to do the funding. We have to do the explaining why it matters and the encouraging people to come find out what kind of transformative experience they can have.
Well, and that's what always gets me because you said it perfectly. In lean times, the arts are the first to go, but I feel like in lean times, the arts are more necessary than ever, and making them accessible to people is more important than ever. Because my students will always ask me when I'm teaching Shakespeare, why do we have to look at Shakespeare?
Yeah.
And so for me, I am going to pass the buck. And
do you mean, why are we still supporting Shakespeare who's dead and can't benefit from the fact that we're doing his plays?
Yes. And why is theater so important in our society?
Twofold answer. I every time I go to direct a Shakespeare play, particularly, I ask myself, what is the value of the dead white guy, right? Why am I directing this play instead of a modern, maybe female or feminist playwright, right? Given my own interests and my own identity. And I like to do both. I think there's really value in both. I think that for actors and audiences, we are becoming so visual as a society, and we're used to tiny sound bites. We're used to TikTok length, real length on Instagram, right? Bits of information coming at us. And increasingly, we look at our phone rather than tuning our ear to just listen. And I think there's something about Shakespeare's demands on us that is good for us, that makes us have to listen in a deeper way than some other language does. And I absolutely believe Shakespeare can be broken open so that it's not just for white dudes, and so that it can be played by anyone, and it can be appreciated by anyone, and it can be absorbed by anyone, because I do think he had a gift for tapping into something essential about humanity, which is why I think he's the guy we keep producing. In terms of why theater is important, I think it's all of that and more. That for me, any piece of art, theater, a painting, a song, a piece of dance, really the essential thing I always think we're asking is for connection to other people, right? And to ideas, and to colors and textures and words that move us. And I always think whether I'm the actor in a play or the director in a play, what I'm doing is getting up there and saying, essentially, this is what I think it feels like to be a human being. Anybody else feel that way? Anybody having the same essential experience of being a human that I am? And so I think plays are empathy machines, because we're putting ourselves out there and asking other people to meet us in that fictionalized space to try to discover a truth and to agree on some basic forms of truth, which also right now I think we're in short supply of in America. And so I think theater and film and dance and songwriting and all of the ways that we can encourage each other. Hey, we're actually all humans, and we're all having some things that we still all feel and we still all experience. Maybe it's love, death, sex, and the crown, right? But it's like all the basic human needs, we all have them. So if we can find a way that is beautiful or thought-provoking or scary to approach those topics with each other, I think then we go, oh, I kind of get you now. And I feel like maybe I'm not as alone in the universe. And I hope maybe you feel like you're not as alone in the universe. And for me, at its core, that's what art is for.
So do you think that's why theater companies in general are usually such a tight-knit space? Because they're constantly having to project that vulnerability,
Yes,
and meet people.
Yeah, I do. And I think it is such an intense thing to create an ensemble with other people. I mean, you do a play with someone, you may not ever have been to their house, you've never met their parents, you don't know their children or whatever, right? You don't even know most of the people that they surround themselves with, but you unite around a story and you say, I am willing to vulnerably bring my body, my voice, my imagination to this story with you. It's a huge act of trust. That you have to establish very quickly, or the play doesn't work, because we don't believe the relationships and we can't play them to their fullest if we're not really engaged with each other. I always think some people jump out of airplanes and that's their way of getting their vulnerable thrill. We walk out on stage, right? We go out there and go, okay, this is me, thinly disguised through fictional circumstances, right? Bringing my imagination to this story, but also bringing my physical being to the story. And I think doing that with other people is a really beautiful, moving, hard, vulnerable thing to do.
We all have to go out there and be Rosalind.
Yeah, she's killing it. By the way, by Rosalind is also one of the actors who played Catherine in Proof. So I don't know which cast of Proof you saw, but she's back.
Oh, I actually saw her. She was doing. She was a ticket counter at a different production.
Oh, great. Yeah,
you know how it works in theater.
Yeah,
you play every role. But I got to see her, and I was like, you were amazing.
Good.
But it is so nice. That's one of my favorite things as somebody who gets to go to these productions with students that I see in the community. We ran into Justin one time at a restaurant in the city, and Michelle's like, wait, didn't we just see him play on the stage like 2 days ago? And I was like, yeah. And so, we took him a little off guard.
Yeah, I bet you did. Right. It is a weird thing. And it's a weirdly public job, right? Actually, directing is a little more anonymous. I can stand at the back of the room on opening night and kind of watch everyone watch the play, which is what I tend to do. But if you're the actor, you're visible and everyone knows that you told that story. And sometimes the audience goes, oh, you told that story. That must be who you are. Right. And sometimes it's definitely not who we are. Right. And so it can be a really funny thing to be recognized and asked about the story that you told that may or may not really be yours.
I almost feel like it's cool though if that happens, because it means that you've pushed it so far that we believe every aspect of that for you. We believe that. And so as like in the audience, if you did that to me, dang, good job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the goal, right? Is truthful representation of life through fictional circumstances. So you want to as fully realize those moments on stage as you can in order to give the audience that ride. Yeah, it's a really weird job that way, isn't it?
How do you, so you said it's been a lot of drama lately in the drama department in terms of doing more, doing pieces that are not comedies.
Yeah, that are maybe thought-provoking.
Sorry, hold on. Okay, great. So you mentioned that you've been doing more drama, tragedies than comedies. The audience and their response and reading that response in a drama versus a comedy. What are the difficulties between that? What are the fun aspects for either?
I love both. I like all of the extremes, but I think it's possible that one of the things I like about acting and about storytelling in general is that you get to experience all the extremes of human behavior in safe circumstances. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm a fairly non-confrontational person in real life. Man, do I love to play, someone who's very confrontational or who's going through something that is incredibly extreme. And then I can pack up my bag at the end of the night and go home and, have my life.
Yes.
And so I love the challenge of telling all kinds of stories and seeing what those extremes are. So I love a tragedy, and I love seeing how deeply we can believe in our story and have the audience take that cathartic journey. I also love, right now I'm having a blast with As You Like It, because I haven't done a real comedy in a while where we've got everything from slapstick wrestling to wordplay and battle of wits, right? We have all kinds of things, live music going on. It's just joyful. And it feels like a relief sometimes, I think, because society and the world feels kind of heavy to me sometimes these days. Right now seems like a great time to explore how silly we are in love, what ridiculousness we can conjure for ourselves sometimes, and all of the misunderstandings that can have a merry ending seem pretty fun for me at the moment.
I definitely understand that. So as we're looking towards As You Like It, are there any things that as an audience we should be looking for? Any moments that for you are some of your most fun moments, or you would like us as a cast to take from it?
There are so many things. I think you'll appreciate all the design elements, for one thing, that I just think from the moment you walk into the space, it will feel like a magical place. And we're going to have actors that will come out before the curtain rises and interact a little bit, ease the audience into the idea that they're part of the play and that there'll be interaction happening in the audience. So I hope what happens to the audience is that they feel like the cast and the story just kind of envelops them from very early on and carries them through the play. And there are a lot of really fun and silly things, but at its core, I also think the play is about love. It is a celebration of love in all its forms. And by doing some non-traditional casting and by switching a few things up in ways that might seem unexpected in the story, I hope what happens is we're celebrating even more kinds of love than Shakespeare was celebrating, or was maybe allowed to celebrate in the Elizabethan playhouses that he was writing for. I hope that's what you'll take from it.
Now I'm ready to go to the theater.
Good. All right, my job here is done then.
So, okay. I do want to say we've talked about funding. We've talked about how important that is. And at Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park, we have been having Shakespeare, in Oklahoma since 1985. which means we're coming up on 40 years, which is a really long time to keep a Shakespeare program going.
Yes, it is.
And it has not been without blood, sweat, and tears and begging.
Oh, is this where the begging happens?
This is where the begging happens. Yeah. So for that, we are looking to raise $40,000 to celebrate the 40 years, to help us get into that next year, and to make sure that we can keep giving these young actors opportunities. And, we talked about Belle and Justin, and those are just two of the many young actors I've had the chance to talk to here who have gotten a chance to do something that they've never done before, who have gotten the chance to costume design, who have gotten the chance to, really broaden their prospects in this realm. And so I just am this is me begging. I admit
I'm here with you. I'm about to support your begging right now.
But so if you can help us raise, we've got a thermometer that is aiming for $40,000. So if you have anything that you can throw at us that will raise the thermometer and get us to where we need to go, we will so appreciate it. And these actors will so appreciate it, and we will keep Shakespeare alive. We will keep empathy alive in Oklahoma. And we just can't tell you how important that is. We tried, but...
Yeah, I mean, this place, Oklahoma Shakespeare, means the world to me. It was the Shakespeare that I saw as I was coming up in the industry. It was some of the first Shakespeare I saw was here. And Catherine McGill, our founding artistic director, who has just retired, worked tirelessly. I mean, the woman is a force, right, to keep things going through so many different kinds of challenges. And Tyler Woods has certainly taken on that mantle now with a group of us who are also trying to help him. We're kind of formed a little artistic pod to go, okay, what can we all bring to the table, right, to the stage? How can we participate? But we will not be able to do it without donors who support the productions that we're doing, but also, as you mentioned, the people, right, who are coming up through programs of their own and looking for the place to work and looking for the place to exercise their own chops and find their own artistic voice. I'm incredibly grateful that these places exist, and I hope that we'll be able to find a really healthy, robust way to continue working in this way for a really long time.
So if you can donate, we will have the link below this podcast. We will have the link on our Instagram page, on our YouTube. We'll have it everywhere. And again, it doesn't take a lot. And we know that not everybody has a lot to give. So we'll take anything you're willing to share with us, even if it's, especially if it's your expertise, your knowledge, your understandings. We'll take that too.
Time is good. Checks are also great.
Yes. Yeah. Also, we have a show coming up. And so you coming to our show, which is the annual Jane Austen Christmas Cracker, which is so much fun.
It is so much fun.
You get ice cream, and then you get to dance around, and there are drinks, and it is, eat, drink, and be merry. That is this show.
Speaking of delightful things that are light and bright and make us feel better about the world, I guarantee this show will be one of them.
Yes. So come dance with us. Come have fun with us. Come eat ice cream with us. That is December 5th through the 22nd. So, any way that you can be part of this, we want you to be part of this community. And we'll take you any way we can get you.
Absolutely. And As You Like It runs October 11th through 20th as well. Plenty of opportunities to see things.
Yes. We're already coming on the 17th. I'm very excited.
Yay.
So I cannot thank you enough for coming and talking with me.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a delight.
It's been so much fun, too much fun. And thank you all for listening. Again, I would love your feedback. What did you like? What do you want to know more about? If you want to get involved and don't know how, please reach out. I am happy to point you in the right direction and give you any information I can. Please subscribe. Again, I promise not to spam you. It's just a way to keep everybody connected. But it's been a pleasure. So just remember, all the world's a stage, and you too can be a shrew.